Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to a long-awaited episode of Between the Shadows. This is Kristen.
This is Kara.
Y'all, I don't even know what to say.
I know. Say welcome back, right?
Yeah, welcome back for sure. Oh, it has been a crazy past several months.
Let's admit it, almost a year.
Almost a year. And I have missed Between the Shadows. I've missed it.
Yeah.
You know, we say often that life happens, and this time really life happened this time.
Yeah, life really happened for the past 8 months.
I mean, some of you who know us know that we both lost our jobs due to the place being closed and trying to search for new jobs and doing interim jobs that really suck, you know, the ones I mean. And
they suck up all your time. And unfortunately, you know, Between the Shadows isn't our day job. Mm-hmm. We do this, because it's our passion and it's what we love, but we do. Life and day jobs do have to take precedent.
Even if they suck.
Yeah.
We all need a paycheck. But we are so happy to be back. So happy to be back. And we've been doing our homework, and we're ready to talk some dark shadows. I've definitely been ready to talk some dark shadows.
Between the Shadows is back for 2024.
Yes. So we're gonna start this year off right. We're only 11 days into this new year, so I feel like that still counts
as
a
great start.
Yeah, it's a good start, I think. But guys, thank you so much for sticking in there, hanging in there with us, believing in us, and all of the comments and questions on when we'll be back. You guys, I wish that we had an answer for you sooner, but we are here. We are ready to do this.
Yes.
So welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, fans of Dark Shadows, fans of Between the Shadows. Huge shout out to Jewel, who helped us out on our last episode of Between the Shadows about 3 months ago, Jewel? I can't remember.
Yeah.
But doing the 53rd anniversary of House of Dark Shadows. That was a really fun chat. Mm-hmm. So Jewel, thank you so much. We got to get back with Jewel too, because it's been a while since we've been on his show and vice versa. So I think the last place we left off when we did a regular episode of Between the Shadows, we were right in the middle of all this Adam rigmarole.
Yeah.
And Adam has, laid down the law, wants a mate, and will kill anybody at Collinwood if he doesn't get what he wants.
Yeah.
So
we're kind of at that point where he has brought up the whole Eve project and trying to get Barnabas and Julia on board with it. Mm-hmm. And last time we chatted, Willie was just refusing.
Yeah, no, Willie, he acted his butt off in that scene, John Carlin did.
Yeah.
I mean, Barnabas and Julia have pretty much succumbed to the fact that they are going to have to make a mate for Adam to hold up their end of the bargain, and they need Willie's help to get body parts. And needless to say, Willie is not interested, at all. Not by any means. And he tells them he would rather go back to Wincliffe than do what they're asking him to do.
Yeah.
And, he even goes, so he's like, Barnabas, I've done a lot for you. I've done many things for you of all kinds of nature. Mm-hmm. But this, absolutely not. I will not. And I think he's absolutely right. I mean, Willie did do a lot for Barnabas. The horrible things that he did for Barnabas. But this, robbing graves for body parts, I feel like would certainly top them all.
I mean, since Willie's been around, since Barnabas has gotten his hands on Willie has done every piece of dirty work for him.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this time he's like, no.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to shout John Carlin out in this scene. The way he responded when Barnabas mentions that he would have to rob graves for body parts. Mm-hmm. Willie looked at him like he looked like he was about to be sick.
Yeah.
And Barnabas started out in his usually firm tone with Willie, you're going to that graveyard and you're getting those body parts. But Willie's like, no. And John Carlin just acted his face off and really got the point across that Willie absolutely 100% did not want to do this. Yeah. And, like we said, Barnabas even threatened, you're going to do this. There's no way out for you. And he threatens to have Willie committed to Wincliffe permanently and then reminds him that he doesn't want to spend the rest of his life in a mental institution. Mm. And Willie responds with, that's right, I don't, but I'd rather go there than do what you're asking me to do, mess around with dead people. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I really believe in this moment that Willie was perfectly justified. I do. I mean, after everything that Willie had done for Barnabas, there really isn't anything that he wouldn't do for Barnabas. But this was definitely crossing that gray line that was there.
Yeah. And, I can imagine just being Willie, his thought process in this moment, with this ultimatum here. This is, the most serious thing, basically, that you have come to me with, that you need me to do for you. Mm-hmm. And that's why he decides to test that threat of being sent back to Wincliffe because he's like, I bet you wouldn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
you
an
need
empty
me.
threat.
Yeah. You need me too much.
Yeah.
And
even if I do refuse in a way, you're still not going to follow through with that threat because you need me too much.
And I think we have to remember that Willie is not in the greatest mental state of mind. That's why he was at Wincliffe, and they sort of sprung him early because they needed his help, you know.
And to be honest, I think Willie was off his rocker from the beginning, just with Jason McGuire
definitely
getting used by him and manipulated by him.
Definitely.
And then going straight into this Barnabas thing and...
But and I definitely wonder if...
getting shot.
Yeah, in his current mental state, could Willie mentally handle it, you know? And I kind of think that I would have acted the same way. I mean,
I would, Willie, like, I could imagine that was his thought process. He's like, mentally, I can't handle this. I could do this, but mentally,
right,
my mental state, I can't handle this.
Right.
I'm going to go off the deep end for real.
And I mean, what Barnabas, to Willie, in Willie's frame of mind, what Barnabas was asking was completely out of the question.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and for me, I'm gonna dig on Barnabas just a little bit, but I sort of felt like Barnabas was taking advantage of Willie because of this hold he's had over him.
Absolutely.
Even though he's not a vampire anymore, Barnabas still treats Willie like he's got a hold over him at times.
Yeah.
And he could have Willie committed again, and Willie called him out.
Yeah.
He was like, "I dare you."
I dare you.
So this is the point, you know, that Willie has stated his side on all of this, and absolutely not, I'm not doing it. Well, then Joe Haskell comes over and shows up at the old house and wants to tell Barnabas about how Nicholas has invited him over and that he's going to accept the invitation, even though Barnabas is urging him not to.
Yeah.
But Barnabas is like, can you come back? Come back and tell me what's going on. I want to know what's going on.
I'm just as curious as you are about this guy.
Right. And because they're still not quite over Cassandra's death, you know, because the body disappeared. And Barnabas is like, I'm too afraid to hope. And, you know, and now Nicholas is inviting Joe, who hasn't had anything to do with any of this. It's like, I need to know. I need to know what's going on. And, I mean, Joe, he also came over to thank Willie and Barnabas for rescuing him in the woods, even though they did not find him in the woods. They found him in a closet at the old house where Adam had stuffed him. Yeah. Barnabas, he's very grateful for the things, but Willie, not so much.
Yeah.
But, you know, he was like, I don't need your thanks. I don't need your appreciation, you know, because he doesn't like Joe. But he does reluctantly accepts the apology for the fight that they had, but tells Barnabas that he wishes they had let him die. Yeah. And Barnabas assumes that that's only because of Willie's feelings for Maggie, but Willie won't talk about it. He just, whatever.
And Willie has told Julia and is now telling Barnabas that he just can't take what's going on around here, and he's actually making plans to leave.
Yeah. He talks with Julia, and he's like, I'm going to clear out. I'm clearing out. And Willie, you know, Julia tells Barnabas, look, he's planning to leave, and I'm okay letting him because I get it. You know, and this is when, another dig at Barnabas. He pulls a very manipulative move on Willie here. For Willie. It was a low blow. He tells Willie that Adam may find out that he refused to help and may go after Maggie because of it. Yeah. And unfortunately, it does work. Yeah. And Willie does agree to stay. Yeah. And it irritated me. It made me irritated with Barnabas because Willie isn't as strong-willed and strong-minded like Barnabas. And I think that Barnabas often took advantage of that. Absolutely. And Willie was one of those characters who, you know, really grew on me as the show progressed. I didn't like to see him spoken down to or taken advantage of because there's a lot of things that if Willie hadn't been there, you know, Barnabas would have been screwed. Julia would have been screwed. Mm-hmm. Maggie would be dead. Mm-hmm. And it just, you know.
It's also, I kind of think like Barnabas acting that way and using Willie that way. In some way, you know, he's become his father, you know, treating Ben Stokes the way he did.
Holy crap, yeah.
You know, like in a way, and like...
You're right. It wasn't quite to the extent and the meanness of Joshua Collins, but Barnabas...
But the using of Willie and the being non-appreciative, you are, but you don't act it type of way.
Like, he treated... It was the same, but I think Barnabas's way of doing it was manipulating. Yeah. And...
Which I think Barnabas always had in him, even when he was human. It was just like in a charming, manipulative way. But now it's just like a sinister, manipulative way.
Yeah, I agree. Know? I agree. And, you know, Barnabas is getting used to life as a man again. Yeah. And I think he still falls into some of those ways, you know. Yeah. And this is the proof, you know. Yeah. So... I mean, from here, it takes us to Nicholas Blair's house, where Joe has shown up for their appointment.
But Angelique answers the door.
Oh, good Lord.
And she says, "Oh, Nicholas is out for the moment." And she begins the manipulation immediately on Joe.
Yep.
And she asks Joe if he is trustworthy. And she goes into the spiel of, she claims that she is a servant in this house and that Nicholas is holding her against her will and she wants help to escape. And as she goes on, she asks for comfort, you know. Joe goes, "Oh, he's such a caring guy," you know, comforting her. And she lays her head on Joe's shoulder and he allows it. And immediately she takes the plunge. After that, you know, Joe's passed out, you know, on the couch. And then Nicholas finally arrives. He's been there the whole time, actually, been hiding away. And just waiting for Angelique to carry out her orders. And she expresses to Nicholas that she's actually rather pleased with Joe as his choice for her.
Yeah, it was like almost like a pet. I rather like him, you know, and it made me a little bit sick to my stomach. But
And then Nicholas sends Angelique away into the room where he was hiding as Joe awakens, and he's pretty blatant with him. He's like, he doesn't bail or dance around the fact that he has has vampire bites on his neck, and that he should probably try to cover them up. And Joe asks to see Angelique and tells Nicholas that she has told him that she's being held against her will and this and that. And Nicholas claims nonsense.
Yeah.
And goes and fetches Angelique from the side room.
Yeah.
Has her explain to Joe that she made it all up. Just meant that she felt like a prisoner.
Yeah.
Not that she is. She just felt like a prisoner.
She completely gaslighted him. Completely.
Yeah.
That's the word floating around for a while, gaslight. And that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah.
You know, Angelique tells him, "Oh, I didn't mean it like that. You know, you didn't hear what you thought you heard." And, you know.
And again, right after the rooster starts to crow. So you get, like, why are you having a meeting at like 5:30 in the morning?
I know. He could have been sleeping all this time.
Like, why are you... It's so funny.
And why would you keep an appointment like that, Joe? Why wouldn't you just go home and sleep?
It's like them having dinner at 11:30 at night.
I know.
I'm like,
it's like they're completely on the wrong schedule
like, these
here.
People never sleep. It's like,
yeah, the time just... Yeah, it's like whenever you see them sleeping, it's...
like, I always find myself looking at the clock in the episodes. I'm like, why is this going on at this time? Like,
Agreed.
They're so weird.
I agree.
But after all that, like, you know, the rooster starts to crow and Nicholas bids Angelique to leave because she's got to go rest.
Right.
So we go back to the old house.
Play dead. I'm sorry.
So at this point, we go back to the old house, and Willie returns with the last of the stuff from Lang's lab for Julia, and he goes to the basement to unload it. And Barnabas returns from the big house, and he tries to phone Joe while he's there, but hasn't heard from him since he left last night to go to Nicholas's place. And he senses something strange is going on. Fancy that.
Yeah.
And seems pretty determined to find out what it is. So he goes to visit Joe and finds him at his place not looking well.
He has all the typical symptoms of a vampire victim.
Yeah.
You know, he looks like crap. He's white as a ghost.
Yeah.
And he's incredibly standoffish.
Yeah.
Even to the point of not answering his phone because he knows it's Maggie and he doesn't want to talk to her.
Yeah.
And quickly kicks Barnabas out. Like, kicks him out.
He doesn't stay long at all.
And blames it on the fact that I'm just not feeling good. I just want to lay down for a while. Barnabas doesn't quite leave it at that. He wants Julia to go and examine him.
Yeah.
But and she's like, "Okay, Barnabas, do you want me to drop everything on the experiment and go and see Joe?
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're kind of on a time crunch here. You know, Adam's on the rampage." And so Barnabas does rethink his decision because the experiment's got to come first. And Julia's got to focus her attention on this because she's already admitted she's out of her element. Mm-hmm. This is totally not in her wheelhouse.
Mm-hmm. I can cure a vampire, but I can't bring a body to life.
Come on, Julia.
But she can.
Yeah.
It's the building of the body, but she's already proven that she can bring it to life.
Yeah, as we very, very soon learn. But then Nicholas Blair comes over and covers for Joe.
Yeah.
And tells Barnabas that he got Joe drunk the previous night and sorry for doing that. We were just having a good old time and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And Nicholas, he certainly thinks of every angle. Instead of just causing Joe to stand up Barnabas, he's got an excuse for it. You know, he went out of his way to cover for Joe.
Yeah.
And Nicholas is very charming this way, very smart, but I believe Barnabas has been through too much to simply let it go.
Yeah.
You know, but with the experiment looming over their heads, he doesn't really put so much effort into the whole Joe thing, at least not right now.
Not until Angelique is calling for Joe at Nicholas's house.
Yeah.
And on Joe's way to the house, he runs into Willie and witnesses Willie robbing a grave.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I do think the whole Joe being Angelique's victim thing, a vampire, I sort of feel like it did fall through the cracks because of Adam's demands for a mate.
Sure.
And if this wasn't looming over their heads, I feel like Joe could have had a completely different outcome.
Oh yeah.
You know. But night falls and Joe knows that Angelique's going to call to him, and that's exactly what she does.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he does try to resist like all victims do, but eventually he succumbs.
Yeah.
And he heads out to find her, but takes a shortcut through the graveyard like he was commanded by her. Mm-hmm. It's like, take a shortcut through the forest. Well, there's the cemetery, and there... I'm sorry. And there's friggin' Willie Loomis digging up a grave, doing exactly what he said he wouldn't do.
Yeah. And this is why.
and Joe, in his very knight in shining armor way, wants to take Willie to the police.
Yeah.
And he's almost successful. If Angelique hadn't been summoning to him, Willie would very likely be behind bars.
Oh yeah,
he would be.
Oh yeah.
And this is what he fears. He drops what he's doing and runs back to the old house. You know, Barnabas. You know,
you're never gonna believe what happened.
We gotta go, Barnabas. You know how he is. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And Barnabas is ready to throw Willie under the bus to the cops as soon as they
dude.
show up. I know.
Like, for real.
And ready to throw him under the bus like he didn't know what he was doing. He just came from a mental hospital. But Joe gets there first.
Yeah.
Makes his way to the old house after answering Angelique, and she gets her bloodlust, under the prompting of Nicholas. He tells Barnabas what he saw in the graveyard, and he tells Barnabas that he's not going to go to the police because he feels like he owes Willie.
Yeah.
A debt of gratitude for saving his life.
Yeah, you bet your ass you do.
But this is when Barnabas more starts to take notice of Joe's behavior.
Yeah.
And, he was like, you were really sick this morning. You don't really seem so sick now. And what were you doing in the graveyard, And Joe, of course, gives the semi-believable answer, and Barnabas isn't quite satisfied. But again, the experiment's looming over them, so Barnabas is like, okay, I don't have time for this,
Right.
So this brings us to Nicholas. Angelique's smiling because she's been satisfied for the moment, and, well, you look terribly happy. Oh, well, shouldn't I be? No. It's like, okay,
no, you're not supposed to be enjoying this.
Yeah, exactly.
This is a punishment.
It's like you're doing my bidding,
Yeah.
But Nicholas is on edge because he heard from the hospital that Tom Jennings has come out of his coma, which is bad news for both of them. Mm-hmm. And Nicholas he decides he's going to go up to the hospital and see what he can find out.
Yeah.
And see how much trouble they're in.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, this leads to Tom's destruction.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we're discussing in this episode. This is the gist of what happens to Tom Jennings. Yeah. And if we remember from the previous episode, Tom Jennings was attacked by Angelique. He was a handyman for Nicholas Blair, and we saw him for a portion of one episode, and then he got bit.
Yeah.
And it was very fast. And so while he's at the hospital, Nicholas runs into Maggie, and she tells him that Tom is he's rambling and raving about a coffin, and informs Nicholas that he and Joe are cousins. Mm-hmm. And Nicholas is like, oh, I didn't know that. You can see the wheels turning in Nicholas's head. Yep. This ends up being good news for him, because as Nicholas sees it, because he's ranting and raving about a coffin, and what else is he ranting and raving about? And because of that, in Nicholas's eyes, there is only one end to Tom. And Joe can help because he's under Angelique's power. Mm. So Joe goes to meet Maggie at the Blue Whale, and their relationship is already on edge because of what's been going on with Joe.
Right.
And this is another nail in the coffin for them. And, he goes to meet Maggie at the Blue Whale, and they quarrel about why Joe has stood up Maggie. And Angelique summons him, of course, in the middle of a date. Mm-hmm. And Joe ends up leaving, and Nicholas jumps in to sweep Maggie off her feet while she's in a vulnerable position. And that's exactly what he does. Yep. He makes her smile. He has her drink, and he's got her laughing, and
just
working
what
that
she
charm.
needs after this Joe situation.
Yeah, definitely. But this was Nicholas's plan all along. That's why Joe was Angelique's victim, because he was trying to get him out of the way so he could move in on Maggie.
Yeah.
Joe goes to Angelique to once again quench her bloodlust.
Yeah.
This is the excuse that he used to leave Maggie at the Blue Whale was, I'm going to the hospital.
Yeah.
But first he goes to see Angelique.
Mm-hmm.
And then he goes to the hospital to see Tom under Angelique's orders.
Mm-hmm.
He hears all about what Tom went through and what Tom saw. And Tom is completely lucid, completely sane.
Yeah.
And he wants Joe to go to the police and tell them about the coffin in Blair's house.
Mm-hmm.
And then he tells Joe about walking through the woods and being attacked by a beautiful blonde woman. And he's like, you don't believe me, do you? He's like, yeah, I believe you. And just, God,
yeah,
this scene broke my heart. Just broke my heart.
And remembering, you know, like Tom and Chris and Joe, I mean, they seem to have that close of a relationship, like they were almost brothers and not cousins. You know, they were
we
really
find
close.
out, yeah, no, for sure. And we find out later that Tom and Chris, Joe was the only family they had.
Yeah.
They have a little sister, but that is way ahead of where we are.
She'll come into the picture.
She will, but not yet.
But yeah.
And
yeah, so they were like brothers.
Yeah, so and we find out a little bit later on, this is just a complete side note, not really relevant to the story a whole lot, but Tom and Maggie used to date too.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But little side note, little trivia. But, you know, Joe's like, no, I believe you. Yeah, and yeah, I'll go to the police for you. He goes to the window. He opens the window and tells Tom to get some sleep. And after a while, Angelique comes in and finishes the job. And this scene just, it completely broke my heart.
Yeah.
Because, like we were saying, you know, Tom is Joe's family.
Yeah.
And you can, Tom was Joe's family, and he helped Angelique end him to protect her.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see the defeat in Joe's face, and you can just hear it in his voice how much he hates himself for helping her.
Yeah.
And for, I say causing the death of Tom, because Angelique could have gotten in whether that window was open or not, but he did help
the aiding
her.
and abetting of it.
Yeah. And he hates himself for it, and it ends up costing Tom his life. And it sort of brought me back to when Carolyn was helping Barnabas just before they went into the past.
Right.
But on a way more intense, heartbreaking level.
Yeah.
And Joe feels guilt about it from this moment on until we no longer see Joe anymore.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's heartbreaking. Yeah. So, because Tom was destroyed by a vampire, well, we know what his fate is, and so does Barnabas and Julia.
Yeah. Yeah. So Julia finds out through Joe. She went to the hospital to get the scoop on Tom, but finds out that he has died instead.
Yeah.
And Joe tells Julia the funeral will be this same day, claiming that's what Tom wanted.
Yeah.
Like, quick, painless, easy.
Whether or not Tom actually said that, we didn't see him say that to Joe.
Yeah.
But at this point, he could have.
Yeah.
Because he knew... I don't think he quite knew what Angelique was, but he knew that something needed to be done, like quick style. And I don't think Tom expected to die. I think he expected Joe to keep his word.
Yeah.
But
them knowing, like you said, what was coming with Tom, that's why they had to make the funeral arrangements, quote unquote, very quick.
Right. And I think Joe definitely knew that, because he knew that Angelique made Tom the way he was.
Yeah.
So
Julia meets Barnabas at the old house after all this, and he's working on the experiment to the best of his ability, and she delivers the news that Tom Jennings died and that he is already buried.
Yeah. And Julia asked Barnabas in this scene where they're, Tom Jennings has died. And she asked him, he's like, we got to take care of this right now. Before he gets up, we got to take care of this. And she asked him, she says, Barnabas, could you actually do it? And he goes, yes. Willie?
Yeah, I know. Hey, Willie?
Yeah, exactly.
What now?
Like he says, yes, I can. And then immediately in the next breath is calling Willie down the stairs.
Yep.
And
why can't you make the steak?
Yeah, exactly. He asked him to make a steak and says the three of them will do it together.
Yeah.
But he always, why couldn't Barnabas make the steak? Why couldn't Barnabas just go and take care of this on his own?
Yeah.
But he doesn't. He calls on Willie and he's like, come on, Barnabas, are you kidding me right now?
Mm-hmm.
Willie is just, he's had it. I'm surprised that, Willie still had most of his wits by the end of all of this. It was just, the three of them, they go to the graveyard. And
the Three Stooges out in the graveyard. Yeah. Trying to take care of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. With one lantern between the three of them, and and they see Joe, who is standing there over Tom's grave, and he is still brooding and feeling more guilt than grief at this point.
Oh yeah.
And that audible thinking, it's my fault, I did this to you. How many other times did I help her and not realize it? Julia I'll get rid of him, and it goes to Joe, tries to get him to come to Collinwood with her, but the dogs are howling and he leaves. And they open up Tom's grave and he's already risen as a vampire. And Barnabas, this was one of those moments where he's a man now, but on realizing that Tom Jennings is now a vampire, he's remembering what it was like to be a vampire and what Tom must be feeling. But it seems like Barnabas is the only one who was reluctant to be a vampire, because Tom didn't really seem so reluctant. He wanted that blood and he wanted it right now. But, Barnabas comments that night holds a special meaning for him, and it always will. And even though Barnabas is human now, he remembers very well the torment that he went through, hoping that somebody would destroy him before he would rise again on another night. And
I think it also has to do with how Barnabas became a vampire.
Yeah.
As opposed to everyone else.
True.
Like, Barnabas had some time to think about what Angelique had said before he actually died. And
True.
I think that's where the reluctancy comes from, unlike the others, where they're bitten, they sleep it off during the day, then they wake up and get bitten again until they die, basically.
True.
And it's quick.
Well, but, and Barnabas was locked in a coffin for almost 200 years.
That too.
Yeah. And, no other vampire had to do that. Yeah. No other vampire on the show, at least, was locked in a box for almost 200 years. And, that alone was probably torturous for him, 200 years without blood and he was still walking, and it just...
And the other vampires had nobody to fear like he had to fear Angelique.
Right.
Like, they didn't have that fear factor.
Yeah. I mean, he had a taste of freedom for a long while.
A vampire, boom, it was free for all.
Yeah, exactly. So. And Barnabas was the only vampire who knew freedom from that.
Yeah.
And then became a vampire again. And I think he went from being a reluctant vampire to being a man and having that freedom. And then when he went back to being a vampire with the Leviathans, oh my gosh, he was so sorrowful and so dejected and so depressed about being a vampire again. Yeah. And just, that was one of those scenes that just... When he realized he was a vampire again, it just tore me to pieces. It made me cry because just that groan of anguish is just, oh my gosh.
But I think he felt it. He was still feeling and responding to what had happened again, still as a human.
Yeah, exactly. Very human
Not
emotions.
As a vampire. Ooh, I feel powerful. It wasn't that. It was like, frick, really?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Now we go to Collinwood, where Jeff Clark is waiting for Vicky, who wants to go down to the old house, much to Jeff's displeasure.
Of course.
And he agrees and drives her down to the old house. He wants to drive her, especially after what happened last time. He let her go down there alone and, being kidnapped by Adam and all that. And Barnabas wanted Vicky to come over so that he could give her back her engagement ring. He claims that Willie found it in the yard where...
Yeah.
Actually, I think Adam... Yeah. I think Adam gave it to him, though. And says, I have Vicky, you better do what I asked.
Yeah.
And, Jeff doesn't believe Barnabas' story, but, it seems like he's more upset because of the days that he had to spend looking for her. And, she doesn't remember what happens to her. Nicholas made sure of that, but she remembers little flashes. I remember the ocean. I remember being near the sea and locked in a room, but none of it made any sense. And, Jeff wants to blame Barnabas for the kidnapping.
Of course.
So much so that he goes down to the old house to talk to him.
Yeah.
And Barnabas is already gone by the time he gets there because he doesn't want to send Willie out alone again. He's learned his lesson. So he goes with Willie to rob the graves. But Jeff sees Eric Lang's journals on the desk. And, Julia comes up and finds him and is like, oh, we're writing a book on Eric. And Jeff's like, still has
I'm
a
interested to hear it.
Yeah, exactly. Has a very bitter taste in his mouth of Eric Lang. And rightfully so. Okay, Jeff, we'll give you that.
Yeah.
But as Jeff is leaving, we see Tom Jennings as a vampire standing in the window.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, Julia becomes his first victim.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk about Tom Jennings as a vampire just for a minute here. Now, he, more than creepy, this man was downright scary.
Yeah.
Okay, he was scary as the vampire.
Yeah.
Like, he was different than Barnabas. Like, Barnabas was still very charming,
Mm-hmm.
very, very likable. And, women who watched the show back when it aired wanted Barnabas to bite them.
Yeah.
Me, I did not want Tom Jennings to bite me. That
was the difference between Tom and all, if not most, of the vampires on the show. Tom wasn't a seductive vampire at all. He just went in for the kill.
Yeah, exactly.
He just went in for the plunge.
Exactly.
Like
I know being a vampire, it's a very sexual thing, and it's, a very sensual thing, But with Tom, I didn't get that so much. At all, really. I didn't get the whole sexual, oh, I'm in love with you, bite me, I mean, Lara Parker had much to say about this, and God rest her soul. She died since the last time we had our last episode. God, I miss you, girl. Yeah. But she had a lot to say about, the vampire, and, it's looking like, it looks like they're just sinking their teeth in, but really it's a representative of a sexual encounter,
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't get that with Tom. Like, with Tom, it was all carnal, and that's, I think that's what caused fear too, so. Yeah. So just a thought, but he was the stuff of nightmares.
Oh yeah,
definitely.
I was gonna say that. Like, Tom was like nightmarish, like scary,
not gothic horror. He was just a freaking nightmare.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But Willie does end up telling Barnabas about finding Julia unconscious, and Julia's like, "Please don't tell Barnabas." But Willie can't hide a dang thing from Barnabas. No. He just can't. No. And Barnabas goes up to speak to her like immediately, like the next morning, and Julie is in there with her scarf and tells Mrs. Johnson, I don't want to see anybody today, not even Barnabas. Don't let anybody up here. Barnabas writes her a letter instead, and Julia rips it up immediately, doesn't even want to read it. But Willie somehow gets past Mrs. Johnson and sneaks into her room at Barnabas's, order. And, we got to work on this experiment, Julia. And you look pretty good tonight. You look like you could get to work. And no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not, she's a victim of a vampire. So she's very, very, very argumentative. And no, I'm not. I just want to sleep and leave me alone. And quickly sends him away as, of course, the dogs start howling. And we see Tom calling to her, and she comes immediately. Mm-hmm. And lucky for us, lucky for Julia, lucky for everybody, Barnabas catches on very quickly what has happened to Julia.
Oh, yeah.
But didn't catch on quite so quickly to Joe. But maybe it's because Julia's not there working on the experiment and he needs her. Yeah. So maybe that's what prompted him to notice, Yeah. He goes up to Collinwood, corners her, and is like, I have questions for you. What's the matter with you? Why are you wearing that scarf? And she's like, Barnabas, leave me alone. Leave me alone. And he rips off the scarf, and there's the vampire. I'm like, see, I don't know how she thought she could ever hide that from him. I guess, which is why she wanted to not see him at all.
Of course.
Because he would have caught on like that.
Yeah.
And so while they're going back and forth about it, Jeff and Vicky run into Adam on the terrace.
Yeah.
And Jeff thinks he can fight Adam, but
he takes him down with one arm.
Yeah, exactly. Jeff afterwards realizes because Vicky was like, Adam! And he was like, what did you call him? And he realizes that, or has a hunch rather, that Adam is Lang's creation.
Yeah.
And goes down to the old house to see if he's right. And we go to, we flash to the old house, and Adam's in the lab and looking at stuff, and Julia and Barnabas walk in, and Adam's been very impatient and is like, why is it taking so long? Why isn't my mate here? And I've held up my end of the bargain. And they go back and forth about the experiment, and Adam is impatient and thinks that they're trying to go back on their word. But Julia tells them that they can possibly have it done in 4 weeks, and Adam gives them 4 weeks exactly, no more. And then Jeff sees Adam leaving the old house. and Jeff can't get in, the door's locked, but he sneaks in through the window. He finds the lab, he finds all of the journals and the paperwork, and he sees the body and then knows exactly what's happening.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Barnabas finds him down there and does come clean to Jeff about what's going on.
Yeah.
Jeff doesn't really want to hear why, but Barnabas is like, do you want Vicky to die? She's going to die if we don't do this. And tells Jeff, and Adam attacked Vicky, is targeting Vicky because he knows how much I love her. Maybe that's not what you want to hear, but that's why.
But that's the truth.
So against his better judgment, Jeff does help, agrees to help
If you don't
them.
want Vicky to die, you're going to have to work with me here.
Exactly. And he hates it, but he's going to do it because he loves Vicky.
Yeah.
Moving right along, this sequence kind of happened a little bit quickly. So, like in the next scene, Roger comes knocking on Barnabas's door at the butt crack of dawn, looking for Julia, because Elizabeth has escaped from Wyncliffe. We remember she went ages ago, before Nicholas Blair even came on the scene.
Yeah.
Because
Cassandra was still here.
Yeah, because Cassandra put that curse on her. You're going to be obsessed with death, and especially your own death.
Yeah.
And they sent her to Wyncliffe because she thought she was Naomi Collins.
Yeah.
Barnabas has locked Julia up in Josette's room so that he can keep an eye on her and make sure she doesn't leave.
Yeah.
And go to Tom. And Barnabas also thinks that if he keeps Julia locked up, that Tom will come to her.
Mm-hmm.
And she's made it through the night, but she worries when night will come again.
Yeah.
For me, it was so hard to see Julia be the victim of a vampire, because she made it through all that time of Barnabas hating her.
Mm-hmm.
And, being a vampire never made her a victim, did go after her a couple times, but changed his mind at the last moment. Julia was successful in all of that, and successful in curing Barnabas, and now he's not a vampire just to succumb to another vampire.
Yeah.
And watching her try to fight her urges while she's trying to do this impossible thing for Barnabas and creating Adam a mate,
Mm-hmm.
I do think it's very interesting that the writers made her a victim of a vampire, but not Barnabas's victim.
Right. Right.
I think if they had done that, I think if they had made Julia Barnabas's victim, I feel like it would have cheapened her loyalty to him.
That, and it wouldn't have been that interesting of a story, because she would have succumbed to Barnabas just like that, and into story
like everyone else. And
because of her love for him.
Yeah, exactly. But her love for him existed outside of ever being a victim of his. She never became his victim.
Yeah.
So I feel like her loyalty to him meant so much more because she never was his victim. And I think the writers knew that too.
Yeah.
And, her loyalty and her friendship had nothing to do with the fact that he was a vampire, and still remained even through, him not being a vampire to him being a vampire again. They became inseparable, and nothing they wouldn't do for each other.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know, just my thought.
And Barnabas was right. Julia resisted Tom, and he ended up coming to her in Josette's room. And Barnabas was ready for him with silver bullets. But again, uncharacteristically, Julia defended the vampire because she had no choice.
Yeah.
And as soon as his back was turned, Julia leaves and goes with Tom.
Yeah.
We flip over to Roger. He finds Liz in the cemetery screaming because she's just seen Tom.
Yeah.
And they bring her back to Collinwood, and Roger asks her who she is and if she knows who he is. And she's like, why are you asking me these questions? Please don't send me back. This and that.
Yeah, yep.
It's like, I promise I'm sane. I'm just obsessed with death. And I don't know why.
And she is.
But
she at least knows that she is Elizabeth and he is Roger.
Yeah.
No more of this Naomi Joshua stuff.
Yeah.
But
so Roger does plan to take Liz back to Wyncliffe, but she overhears and tries to prove to Julia that she is sane, but Julia is too distracted by the howling of the dogs and just leaves the house.
Yeah.
And Liz follows her to the crypt where Tom's coffin is. But poor Liz, she's still so obsessed with her own death, and she thinks it's her. She's like, whose coffin is this?
Is it mine?
Is it mine?
Is it mine? and Julie's just like, get out, get out,
out.
Get out.
And then, Julia's starting to think that Tom's not going to show up, and
she's like crying and cowering in the corner. You said you called to me.
But Tom is lurking in the shadows,
waiting to get a bite.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's good that Elizabeth, I feel like it's good that Elizabeth followed her, because
they didn't know where Tom was hiding.
Exactly. And even though she didn't come right out and tell Barnabas because her mind is so warped.
Yeah.
She went to the old house because she knew if she went back to Collinwood, they'd take her back to Wyncliffe. So she was seeking shelter with Barnabas, and Barnabas kind of objected at first, but he's like, no, you can stay. Especially when she was like, they've already got my coffin. It's hiding in the old crypt.
He's
and
like, where is it?
He was like, wait. and where did you see this? He's like, Julia Hoffman, she was involved, and she was trying to hide it from me. And she's like, wait, you saw Julia? Where is she? You know?
Yeah.
And Elizabeth told Barnabas where it was. And Barnabas is smart, and he caught on. He was like, okay, Willie, take her upstairs. I'll be back.
Yeah.
And they find Julia. Barnabas finds her in this crypt, and she's damn near dead, y'all. She's almost dead.
Yeah.
And, Barnabas is carrying her in his arms, because she can't even walk, and takes her back to Josette's room, and she comes to just enough to say, I'm going to die. She's a doctor. She knows I'm going to die, And Barnabas is like, you know, the only way that's going to cure... Willie's wanting to take her to the hospital.
Yeah.
Let's get her a blood transfusion. And Barnabas is like, no, there's no time. And it's almost morning anyway.
Yeah.
And so he gets the steak and he runs off. And Willie goes with him, but gets spooked once they get to the crypt. Yeah, poor Willie. But it's right before dawn. So Tom's not in his coffin yet.
Yeah.
You know, and Barnabas... You know, it was like, you only have a minute left, Tom, get back in the coffin, you know, but Tom goes after him, you know, and they struggle and Barnabas passes out, you know, hits his head or something and gets knocked out while Tom is crawling back into his coffin, you know, and Barnabas regains consciousness and Liz is sitting with Julia at the old house and he begins to think to himself, you know, he finds the coffin, he opens it and Tom is laying there, you know, asleep and he just begins to think to himself, you know, how many times, how many others have done exactly what I'm doing while I'm laying in that coffin, you know? Yeah. He's like, but, you know, I guess it must not have been very many because I'm still alive, you know? Yeah. And so he only considers it for a moment and he stakes Tom. Yeah. And Julia is finally saved from death and becoming a vampire. Yeah. Friends, that is the end of Tom's demise. Yeah. I mean, not quite the end. Like, for those of us who have watched a little past this. Yeah. But for now, Julia has been saved. And Julia is saved and doesn't succumb to death, doesn't succumb to being a vampire, and hallelujah.
Right.
So.
It's sad how short Tom's stint was on the show.
I agree.
You know, because the Jennings brothers, you could see it in Chris. You could see it even in Amy. Like, the Jennings were sweet people, you know, very caring people.
Very
pretty much family.
People.
Like, with Joe and through Maggie and
through the Collinses.
And through the Collinses. Like, Joe worked for the Collinses on the shipping ports, didn't he?
Yeah, and we find out when we get Chris Jennings later on down the line that, you know, he and Carolyn used to date and they were all good friends and it's just, you know, the Jennings family is as sweet as they were, you know, they had some kind of generational curse, but we find out about that too. So but I agree. I mean, I kind of would have liked to have seen Tom outside of the vampire, but but we didn't. We only got to see Tom for a short period of time, and but yeah, that's the end, folks. Yeah. For this episode at least, and we are going to do our very, very best not to make you wait another almost year for another one of these. And
but our next discussion, I really going into Lang's experiment here, or Julia's experiment, really.
Yeah. Next time, I think we're probably going to get into the bulk of Julia's solo experiment. Yeah. And all of the drama that unfolds with that. Yeah. And it is a lot of drama. There's a lot of stuff to unpack with Julia's solo project. Yeah. So, friends, we just want to say thank you so much for coming back to this revival episode of Between the Shadows. Yeah. And we just want to say thank you so much for listening. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for all of your input, guys. We really do appreciate it. And we are still at the same contact info, Between the Shadows 2021 at Gmail. We are on Twitter. We're on Facebook. We try to be as responsive as we can. But just send us with any comments or concerns. We'll take it all. We'll take it all. But until next time, guys, remember to keep it between us and the shadows. Good night.
Good night.
For nearly 200 years, I was like the man out there. Night has a special meaning for me, Julia. It always will. Even standing here now, I remember the urge that I had to find someone, the feeling that I must attack a poor innocent victim. I must find him, Julia. You've been listening to Between the Shadows, a Dark Shadows podcast. All original Dark Shadows music, video clips, images, and media are not owned by Between the Shadows and is the sole property of Dan Curtis Productions and is only used to promote Dark Shadows and should not be distributed, copied, or reproduced.